The cargo bay doors of the Times Wandering Star Times hissed open, releasing a wave of recycled air into the bustling corridors of Viridian Gate Station. Captain Hyun stepped onto the metal walkway, his boots clanging against the grated floor. Behind him, his first officer Mira checked her datapad, reviewing the repair list they needed to complete before their next run. 3 days here maximum, Mira said, her voice carrying a note of warning. We can't afford more docking fees. Hyun nodded absently. His ship had taken some damage during their last cargo run through an asteroid field. Nothing critical, but enough to need attention. The station around them hummed with activity. Dozens of species moved through the corridors, speaking in countless languages, trading goods from 1,000 worlds. This was neutral space, where the rules of the major empires held no power, while Quan, their engineer, handled the repair negotiations. Hyun decided to explore the lower markets. He always enjoyed these visits. The lower levels of stations like this sold everything from rare spices to illegal weapons, though Hyun kept his business legitimate. Mostly, the market stalls stretched in every direction, creating a maze of colors and sounds. Merchants called out in broken common galactic, advertising their wares. Hyun was examining a set of navigation crystals when he noticed something unusual. A crowd had gathered near one of the smaller stalls, and people were laughing. Curious, he pushed through the crowd. At the center, he saw them. Tiny beings. No taller than his hand was long. They had delicate, crystalline wings that caught the station's artificial light, creating rainbow patterns on the metal floor. Their bodies were slender and bird-like, with large eyes that seemed too expressive for such small faces. A larger merchant, some kind of reptilian species, was blocking their stall. You pay triple rent or you leave, the merchant hissed. Your kind too small to deserve this space. One of the tiny beings, wearing what looked like formal robes despite its size, stepped forward. Its voice was surprisingly clear, projected by some kind of translation device. We have paid the standard rate. We have rights under station law, the reptilian merchant laughed. Rights? You so small. I could step on all of you. Who would care? Hyun felt something twist in his chest. He had seen bullying before, across 100 worlds. Size didn't matter. Wrong was wrong. He stepped forward, his tall frame casting a shadow over the scene. Station law says they paid. They stay, Hyun said calmly. Unless you want me to call station security? The reptilian merchant looked up at Hyun, assessed him for a moment, then spat on the floor. Humans. Always sticking your noses where they don't belong. But he moved away, grumbling. The tiny being in robes looked up at Hyun. Even from this height difference, Hyun could see gratitude in those large eyes. Thank you, human. I am Tillith, merchant of the Pillith people. Hyun, he replied, crouching down to be closer to their level. You're far from home? We have no home to return to, Tillith said, and there was such sadness in those words that Hyun felt it like a weight. May I speak with you? Privately? Something in Tillith's voice made Hyun agree. He led the small group to a quiet corner of the market, where they climbed onto a cargo crate to be at a better height for conversation. There were 5 Pillith in total, and they all looked exhausted. Tillith began to speak, and Hyun listened with growing horror. The Pillith came from a world called Korin, a beautiful planet with crystal forests and deep caverns. But their world lay between 2 aggressive empires, the Vaxir Dominion and the Threnic Swarm. Both empires wanted Korin's resources. Neither cared about the Pylith who lived there. They came 6 months ago, Tillith explained. The Vaxir, with their mining machines. The Threnic, with their hive ships. They said we were too primitive to own our own world. They said we were obstacles to progress. What about galactic law? Hyun asked. The protection treaties for developing species? Neither empire recognizes those laws. Another Pillith spoke up, her voice bitter. They say treaties are for the weak. They crush our cities with their machines. They take our people for experiments. We are dying, Captain Hyun. Our population has fallen by half. Hyun sat back, his mind racing. This was bigger than a simple dispute. This was genocide, happening while the galaxy looked away. Why come here? Why not petition the Galactic Council? We did, Tillith said softly. They said it was an internal matter of the empires involved. They said they could not interfere. But we heard stories about humans. You are new to galactic space, but you do not ignore injustice. You fight for those who cannot fight for themselves. Is this true? 2. Hyun wanted to say no. He wanted to say that humans were just trying to survive out here like everyone else. But he couldn't. He thought of Earth's history, of all the times people had stood up against impossible odds because it was right. I'm just a cargo captain, he said finally. But I know people who might help. If I take you to human space, if you testify about what's happening, maybe we can get diplomatic pressure applied. Tillith's wings shimmered with emotion. You would do this? For us? We can pay very little. Keep your money, Hyun said, standing up. But I need to warn you. If I take you aboard, we might be followed. The empires won't like this. We are already dying, Tillith said simply. This gives us hope. Mira was not happy when Hyun returned with the pillith. You're serious about this? She asked, pulling him aside. You want to smuggle refugees past 2 major empires? They're not refugees, they're witnesses, Hyun corrected. And yes, we're doing this. Kwon looked up from his repair work. The ship's not in great shape for a run past hostile territory. Long. Then fix what you can. We leave in 12 hours. The Times Wandering Star Times departed Viridian Gate on schedule, with 5 pillith hidden in the cargo bay, living in a specially prepared container with air and supplies. For the first 2 days, everything went smoothly. They crossed through neutral space, heading toward the nearest human outpost. Then the Vaxier found them. The patrol ship appeared on their sensors like a predator spotting prey. Human vessel. This is Vaxier Patrol Command. You are transporting stolen property. Surrender your cargo immediately. Hyun's hands tightened on the controls. Stolen property? Those are living beings. Your opinion is irrelevant. Comply or be destroyed. Mira was already plotting a jump to hyperspace, but they needed 3 more minutes to charge the drive. The Vaxier ship was closing fast, weapons powering up. Hyun pushed the engines to maximum, the old ship groaning in protest. 2 minutes, Mira called out. Weapons fire lit up space around them. The Times, Wandering Star Times shook as shots impacted their rear shields. Kwon rerouted power from life support to shields, buying them precious seconds. 1 minute, more impacts. Sparks flew from a control panel. The ship screamed through space, running for its life. Jump. Reality twisted. The stars stretched into lines, and they plunged into hyperspace. Behind them, the Vaxier ship could only watch as they escaped. But Hyun knew this was just the beginning. He had sent an automated distress signal to human space, along with all the data Tillith had given him. In his cargo bay, the pillith held each other, their wings trembling. They had taken the first step. Now, they could only hope that humanity would answer their call for help. Somewhere in the darkness of space, forces were already beginning to move. The small act of one cargo captain was about to change everything. Commander Day was drinking his 3rd cup of coffee when the distress signal arrived. He had been stationed at Forward Operating Station Artemis 7 for 2 years, and most of that time had been routine patrols and cargo inspections. The coffee was terrible, but it kept him awake during the night shift. The communication officer, a young woman named Sora, jumped from her seat. Commander. Priority distress signal from the border region. It's Captain Hyun of the Times. Wandering Star **. Day knew Hyun. The cargo captain had a reputation for being reliable and honest, not the type to send false distress signals. Put it through. What came through the transmission made Day set down his coffee. Hyun's message was brief, but clear. He had 5 refugees from a species called the Pillith. They claimed their world was being destroyed by 2 major empires. He had footage, he had testimony, and he was being hunted by Vaxier patrol ships. "Get me Fleet Command," Day ordered, "and prepare a rescue escort. I want 3 ships ready to jump in 20 minutes. While the rescue was organized, Day reviewed the footage Hyun had sent. What he saw made his blood run cold. The videos showed a beautiful world, with crystal forests and delicate architecture. Then, they showed the machines. Massive Vaxier mining equipment, rolling over cities like they were nothing. Threnic hive ships, deploying drones that captured Pillith by the hundreds. One video showed a Pillith settlement being crushed. The tiny beings ran in all directions, their wings unable to carry them fast enough. The machines didn't even slow down. Day had to look away. When the Times Wandering Star Times finally limped into Artemis 7's docking bay, it was barely holding together. Hyun met Day at the airlock, looking exhausted but determined. Behind him, the 5 Pillith emerged, their large eyes taking in the human station with wonder and fear. "They need to speak with someone in authority," Hyun said without preamble. "Someone who can actually do something." Day crouched down to meet Tillith's eyes. The small being straightened its robes and spoke with dignity that belied its size. "Commander, my people are dying. We ask for help. Not charity. Not pity. Justice. Come with me," Day said. "I know someone who needs to hear your story." Admiral Sung had commanded the Third Fleet for 15 years. She was known for her strategic brilliance and her unwavering dedication to doing what was right, even when it was difficult. When Day's urgent communication reached her at Fleet Command, she cleared her schedule immediately. The meeting took place in a secure conference room. Tillith and the other Pillith were given a special platform, so they could be seen clearly. Also present was Hana, a scientist and diplomat who specialized in first contact situations. She had kind eyes and a gentle manner that put the Pillith at ease. For 3 hours, the Pillith told their story. They showed more footage. They presented data on population decline, on destroyed cities, on missing people. Hana asked careful questions, documenting everything. Admiral Sung listened in silence, her face carved from stone. When the testimony ended, Sung leaned back in her chair. "This is mass murder. Clear violation of sapient rights, even by the most basic standards. The Vaxier and Threnic don't recognize those standards," Day pointed out. "And Koran is outside our territory. Intervention would mean war." "I'm aware," Sung said coldly. "But since when do humans ignore genocide because it's inconvenient?" She stood up and addressed the Pillith directly. "I cannot promise you that my government will act. But I can promise that your testimony will be heard. I will personally bring this to the Defense Council and the Diplomatic Corps. You will not be ignored. Raider. Elan Raider. Raider. Raider." Tillith's wings shimmered with emotion. "That is all we ask. To be seen. To be heard. Welcome. To be seen. Welcome." Over the next week, events moved quickly. Hana's interviews with the Pillith were comprehensive and devastating. She worked carefully, making sure every detail was documented. The scientist in her was appalled by what she learned. The Vaxier saw the Pillith as little more than vermin. The Threnic considered them useful only as biological data. The recordings went to the Human Military Command, to the Diplomatic Service, and somehow, they leaked to the public networks. Within days, billions of humans had seen the footage of Pillith cities being destroyed. The public reaction was immediate and fierce. Messages flooded government offices. "Help them. We can't just watch this happen. If we don't stop this, what does that make us?" The Defense Council met in emergency session. The debate was intense. Some argued that intervention would be too costly, that humanity couldn't afford war with 2 empires at once. Others argued that this was exactly the moment that defined who humans were as a species. Admiral Sung made her case. Gentlemen, we are being tested. The galaxy is watching to see what humanity stands for. If we do nothing, we tell every bully in space that they can crush the weak without consequence. If we act, we send a different message. And what message is that? One counselor asked. That size doesn't matter. That justice matters. That humanity will not stand by while innocents are slaughtered. The vote was close, but it passed. Humanity would intervene, not with a full invasion, but with a carefully planned operation. Establish a protected zone around Pilith population centers. Evacuate those who wanted to leave. Make it clear that Korin was under human protection. Captain Yule was chosen to lead the task force. He was young for a captain, only 35. But he had proven himself in a dozen skirmishes. More importantly, he understood restraint. This mission wasn't about conquest. It was about protection. His flagship was the destroyer times Defiant Echo Asterisk, a beautiful ship with cutting-edge weapons and shields. 2 more destroyers and 2 frigates would accompany him. It wasn't a huge force, but it was enough to make a statement. Before the fleet departed, Admiral Sung met privately with Yule. I'm sending you into a situation with no good options. The Vaxir and Thrennic won't back down easily. They'll test you. They'll try to provoke you into overreacting. What are my rules of engagement? Yule asked. Protect the Pilith. Don't fire first, but don't hesitate to defend yourself. And remember, the galaxy is watching. Everything you do reflects on humanity. No pressure then, Yule said with a slight smile. Sung didn't smile back. Captain, this could become the war that defines our generation. Make sure it's one we can be proud of. The diplomatic offensive launched simultaneously with the military deployment. Human ambassadors contacted both the Vaxir Dominion and the Thrennic Swarm. The message was formal, but firm. Cease all operations on Korin. Recognize Pilith sovereignty. Withdraw your forces. Failure to comply would result in human intervention. The Vaxir response came quickly. It was dismissive and arrogant. The humans are children playing at galactic politics. They do not understand the realities of power. We will continue our lawful operations. The Thrennic response was different but equally negative. Their collective intelligence analyzed the situation and concluded that humans were bluffing. Resource extraction will continue. Human threats are noted but irrelevant. Neither empire believed that humans would actually fight for a species as small and seemingly insignificant as the Pilith. They were about to learn a hard lesson. Captain Yule's task force entered the Korin system exactly 1 week after the Pilith had arrived at Artemis 7. The planet hung in space like a jewel, its crystal formations visible even from orbit, but the beauty was marred by the presence of dozens of Vaxir mining ships and Thrennic hive vessels. On the surface, Pilith communities watched the sky with desperate hope. They had heard rumors that help was coming. They had dared to believe. Now, human ships hung in space above them, shields glowing, weapons ready. Yule opened a channel on all frequencies. This is Captain Yule of the Earth Defense Force. Korin is now under human protection. All unauthorized mining and extraction operations must cease immediately. You have 12 hours to withdraw. In the Vaxir command ship, Fleet Commander Draxnor laughed. They send 5 ships against our fleet of 30? The humans are fools. In the Thrennic Hive Mother, the collective intelligence calculated possibilities. Human intervention is unexpected, but manageable. Current forces are sufficient to continue operations. Both empires made the same mistake. They looked at the size of the human force and saw weakness. They didn't understand that humans didn't measure strength the same way others did. They measured it in determination, in technology, and in the willingness to make hard choices. The 12-hour deadline passed. Neither empire withdrew. Captain Yule looked at his crew, saw the resolve in their eyes, and gave the order that would change everything. All ships, battle stations, protect the Pilith, engage at will. The first shot came from a Threnic hive cruiser. It was a massive ship, 3 times the size of Yule's destroyer, covered in organic armor that pulsed with life. The cruiser had been lowering mining drones toward a Pillith settlement when the human frigate Times, Morning Star Times, positioned itself directly in the path. The Threnic didn't hesitate. A burst of plasma fire erupted from the cruiser's biocannons, slamming into the frigate's shields. The human ship shuddered but held position. Inside, Captain Aaron counted to 3, giving the enemy one last chance to stand down. They didn't. "Return fire," Aaron ordered calmly. "Disable their weapons. Don't destroy the ship." The Times Morningstar Times launched a spread of missiles. Each one was small, barely larger than a human torso. But they moved with frightening intelligence. They swerved around the cruiser's defensive fire, adjusted their approach in real time, and struck with surgical precision. 3 explosions blossomed on the hive cruiser's hull. Its biocannons went dark. Fleet Commander Draxnor of the Vaxier watched this exchange with growing anger. The humans dared to fire first? This insult could not stand. He opened a channel to his fleet. "All ships, engage the human vessels. Show them the price of interfering with the Vaxer Dominion." 30 Vaxier warships moved as one, their formations tight and disciplined. They were built for intimidation as much as combat, covered in heavy armor, plating, and bristling with weapons. Against most enemies, the sight alone would be enough to win. Captain Yule watched them come. His tactical officer, a sharp woman named Gina, was already running calculations. They're using a standard wall formation. Strong frontal armor, weak on the flanks. "Then we don't hit them head-on," Yule replied. "All ships, pattern Gamma 7. Split their formation." The human ships moved like dancers compared to the Vaxier's heavy march. 2 destroyers swept to the left, the other to the right, while the frigates accelerated straight ahead before breaking up and down. The Vaxier formation, built for frontal assault, struggled to track multiple targets moving in 3 dimensions. The humans opened fire from all angles. Their railguns were terrifying weapons, accelerating slugs of metal to a fraction of light speed. The projectiles had no energy signature to track, no warning before impact. They simply appeared and struck with devastating force. Vaxier shields, designed to deflect energy weapons, offered almost no protection against solid matter moving at those speeds. 2 Vaxier cruisers took critical hits in the first exchange. Their armor cracked, atmosphere venting into space. 3 more ships lost weapons or engines. The Vaxier wall formation collapsed into chaos as captains tried to maneuver independently. "Sir, they're breaking ranks," Gina reported. "Our AI is predicting their movements before they make them." This was another advantage the Vaxier hadn't anticipated. Human ships were networked together, sharing data in real time. When one ship's sensors detected an enemy, all ships knew. When one AI calculated a firing solution, all ships benefited. The human fleet fought as one organism with 5 bodies. Draxnor couldn't believe what he was seeing. His fleet outnumbered the humans 6 to 1, yet they were being picked apart. He ordered his ships to regroup, to focus fire on single targets. But the humans were always moving, always one step ahead. On the surface of Corin, the Pillith watched the battle in the sky. Tillith stood with others of his kind on a crystal outcropping, their wings reflecting the flashes of weapons fire above. "They're really doing it," someone whispered. "The humans are fighting for us." But the battle was far from over. The Threnic swarm operated differently than the Vaxier. Where the Vaxier relied on individual ship commanders, the Threnic moved as a true collective. Their hive mind analyzed the human tactics, adapted, and responded. 3 more hive cruisers emerged from the far side of Corin. They didn't attack the human ships directly. Instead, they released thousands of small drone craft. Each drone was barely larger than a fighter, but there were so many of them that they filled space like a swarm of insects. "Missile defense, full auto," Yule ordered. The human ship's point defense systems came alive, tracking and destroying hundreds of drones. But for every drone destroyed, 10 more took its place. The swarm began to overwhelm the defenses through sheer numbers. One drone got through, slamming into the frigate times Morningstar Asterisk. Then another, and another. Captain Aaron's ship began taking damage, small punctures in the hull that bled air and power. "We can't hold this position much longer," Aaron reported. Yule made a quick decision. "All ships, form up on the times Morningstar Asterisk. Overlapping point defense. Quan, I need you to do something crazy." Engineer Quan, who had joined the mission aboard the Times Defiant Echo Asterisk, looked up from his station. "How crazy?" "Crazy? Can you overload our shield emitters? Create a pulse that would fry anything electronic in close range?" Quan's eyes widened. "Yes, but we'd be defenseless for 90 seconds. Afterward, do it." On my mark. The human ships drew together in a tight formation. The Threnic drones swarmed closer. Sensing vulnerability, they clustered around the human ships, like flies on meat. Yule watched the tactical display, waiting for the perfect moment. Now, the Times Defiant Echo Asterisk shields exploded outward in a sphere of electromagnetic energy. Every drone within a kilometer was instantly disabled, their simple brains fried by the pulse. Thousands of them went dark, drifting in space like dead leaves. The Threnic collective recoiled. This was unexpected. These humans had destroyed a significant portion of the drone swarm with a single action. The hive mind recalculated. Perhaps these newcomers were more dangerous than anticipated, but Draxnor saw opportunity. The human flagship's shields were down. "All ships, concentrate fire on the lead destroyer. End this now." 20 Vaxier ships turned their weapons toward the Times Defiant Echo Asterisk. Energy weapons charged, missiles locked on. For a moment, it looked like the humans had made a fatal mistake. Then Captain Hyun's Times Wandering Star Times dropped out of hyperspace directly between the Vaxier fleet and the human formation. The old cargo ship wasn't a warship, but it had shields, and it had courage. Behind it came 3 more civilian vessels, traders and haulers, who had heard the call and come running. "Captain Yule, this is Hyun. We're not much, but we can buy you 90 seconds. The civilian ships spread out, their shields overlapping to create a barrier. Vaxier weapons fire hammered into them. Hyun's ship shook violently, alarms screaming, but the shields held. Barely. Those 90 seconds felt like forever. Then the Times Defiant Echo Asterisk's shields came back online, stronger than before. The human warships resumed their attack with renewed fury. More Vaxier ships took critical damage. More Threnic drones were destroyed. Draxnor finally accepted the truth. He was losing. Badly. With a roar of frustration, he ordered his fleet to retreat. The surviving Vaxer ships broke off and jumped to hyperspace. The Threnic, after a moment of collective calculation, followed suit. The battle was over. In the sudden silence, Yule opened a channel to Hyun. Hyun laughed, the sound edged with relief. "Couldn't let you have all the glory. Besides, the Pillith are worth it." On the surface of Koran, the Pillith erupted in celebration. Their wings created a storm of rainbow light as they danced. For the first time in months, they dared to hope. The humans had come. The humans had fought. The humans had won. But in his command ship, racing back toward Vaxier space, Draxnor was already planning. This defeat would not stand. He would return with more ships, more firepower. He would crush these humans and take what was rightfully Vaxier property. The Threnic hive mind calculated differently. The humans were effective warriors, but surely they would not risk a prolonged conflict. The swarm would shift tactics. Instead of direct confrontation, they would attack human supply lines, human colonies. Anything to make the war too expensive to continue. Neither empire understood what they had started. Admiral Sung, receiving Yule's report, understood perfectly. She looked at the casualty figures. 3 human dead, 12 injured. But the Pilith settlements protected. The numbers were acceptable. The precedent was set. Prepare the fleet, she told her staff. This was just the opening move. They'll be back. And when they come, we need to be ready to show them that protecting the innocent isn't negotiable. Deep in human space, the news of the Battle of Corin spread like wildfire. Young people lined up at recruitment centers. Factories began producing weapons and ships at maximum capacity. Earth had committed to a path, and humanity would see it through. The 3-system war had begun, and it would reshape the galaxy. Admiral Sung stood in the war room, studying the holographic display that showed 3 star systems. Red markers indicated Vaxir forces, green for Threnic, blue for human. The colors were bleeding together across the borders of all 3 systems. What had started as a localized conflict around Corin had exploded into something much larger. Status report, she ordered. Commander Day stepped forward, his face lined with exhaustion. The Vaxir hit our supply depot at Helion Station 12 hours ago. We lost 6 cargo ships and their crews. The Threnic deployed bioweapons at our colony on Terra Nova 3. We evacuated most civilians, but the planet's ecosystem is contaminated. It will take years to recover. Sung's jaw tightened. Both empires had escalated beyond her predictions. They weren't just fighting over Corin anymore. They were trying to drive humanity out of the region entirely. And our response? Captain Yule's task force has been reinforced. We now have 15 warships in the Corin system. The Pilith settlements are secure, but we're stretched thin elsewhere. Then we need to change the equation, Sung said. She turned to her strategic team. The Vaxir and Threnic think this is about territory and resources. They're wrong. This is about making bullying too expensive to sustain. We need to hit them where it hurts. Over the next month, human forces demonstrated what their military could really do. Unlike the Vaxir with their heavy armor and rigid tactics, or the Threnic with their swarm mentality, humans fought with adaptability and precision. In the Helion system, a Vaxir mining operation was processing asteroids when human stealth ships appeared from nowhere. They weren't large vessels, just corvettes with advanced cloaking technology, but each one carried enough missiles to cripple a mining station. The attack was over in minutes. The Vaxir lost 3 months of resource extraction in one strike. Captain Yule led the assault personally. This is the price, he broadcast on open channels. Every time you attack our civilians, we hit your industry. Every time you refuse to negotiate, the cost goes up. Every time, Draxnor responded with rage. He gathered every ship he could from Vaxir-controlled space and launched a massive assault on Corin. Over 70 ships jumped into the system, the largest fleet the Dominion had assembled in decades. This time, they would overwhelm the humans through sheer numbers, but the humans had been preparing. Yule's 15 ships were supported by a network of orbital defense platforms, each one bristling with railguns and missile launchers. And the humans had help. Captain Hyun and a fleet of civilian volunteers had brought supplies and were ready to fight again. The Battle of Corin's Rings lasted 72 hours. It was brutal and exhausting. The Vaxir came in waves, trying to crush the human defenses through attrition, but human ships fought with a ferocity that shocked the Vaxir. When their weapons ran dry, they used their ships as battering rams. When their shields failed, they kept fighting. Engineer Quan performed miracles during those 3 days. He kept damaged ships running with spare parts and determination. When the Times' defiant Echo Times lost its main railgun, Quan rerouted power through secondary systems and got it firing again within an hour. This ship doesn't quit, he muttered to himself. And neither do I. On the 3rd day, reinforcements arrived from Earth. Admiral Sung had pulled ships from every sector she could. 20 fresh warships dropped out of hyperspace, their crews eager for battle. The Vaxir fleet, already battered and exhausted, broke and ran. Draxnor's flagship limped back to Vaxir space with half its crew dead and most of its weapons destroyed. The proud fleet commander sat in his command chair, staring at the damage reports. He had brought 70 ships to Corin. Only 35 returned. The humans had held with less than half his numbers. The Threnic swarm learned different lessons. They observed that humans became more dangerous when defending fixed positions. So the Threnic shifted to guerrilla warfare. Small groups of ships would attack human supply convoys, then disappear before defenses could respond. They deployed biological weapons against human colonies, turning entire planets into death traps. But the Threnic underestimated human technology in other areas. Specialist Aaron, who had commanded the frigate times Morningstar Asterisk, transferred to cyber warfare operations. She led a team that did something the Threnic thought impossible. They hacked the hive mind communication network. It wasn't easy. The Threnic used organic technology that was fundamentally different from human systems. But Aaron was brilliant and patient. She studied captured Threnic drones for weeks, learning how their biocomputers worked. Then she designed a virus that could spread through the swarm's communication network. When she unleashed it, the effect was devastating. Across 3 sectors, Threnic ships suddenly lost coordination. Their collective intelligence fractured into confused individuals. Ships collided with each other. Drones fired on friendly vessels. The chaos lasted only 10 minutes before the swarm adapted and purged the virus. But those 10 minutes cost them dearly. The Threnic Queen, an ancient intelligence that had lived for centuries, felt something she had never experienced before. Uncertainty. These humans were not behaving according to any pattern the swarm understood. They didn't fight for territory or resources. They fought for abstract concepts. How could such a species be predicted? While battles raged in space, diplomat Hana worked tirelessly on another front. She traveled to neutral stations, to minor powers throughout the region, presenting evidence of Vaxir and Threnic atrocities. She showed the galaxy what had happened to the Pillith and what would happen to other small species if the empires weren't stopped. Slowly, opinion began to shift. Several minor powers declared their support for human intervention. Trade embargoes were placed on both the Vaxir and Threnic. It wasn't much, but it added pressure. The empires found themselves increasingly isolated. Then Engineer Quan made a discovery that changed everything. While helping Pillith engineers rebuild their settlements, he noticed something interesting about their crystalline technology. The Pillith used these crystals for communication and power storage, but Quan realized they had another property. They could refine Viridium-9, the rare isotope crucial for advanced FTL drives. Both empires wanted Corin for its Viridium-9 deposits, but they couldn't refine it efficiently. The Pillith, living among the crystals for millennia, had adapted their technology to work with the material. With Quan's help, they developed a refining method that was cheaper and faster than anything the Vaxir or Threnic could achieve. Admiral Sung immediately saw the implications. We can offer this to neutral powers. Anyone who recognizes Pillith sovereignty and signs a non-aggression pact gets access to the technology. The response was immediate. Dozens of minor powers rushed to sign agreements with humanity. Suddenly, the Vaxir and Threnic weren't just fighting Earth. They were fighting an emerging coalition of species who all wanted access to the new refining technology. The economic pressure began to crush the Vaxir. Their war effort was expensive, and now they were losing trade partners. Internal factions within the Dominion started questioning whether Corin was worth the cost. Some Vaxir colonies even began negotiating separate peace treaties with humanity. The Threnic swarm faced a different crisis. Their collective intelligence was designed to make efficient decisions based on cost-benefit analysis. As the war dragged on, the math became clear. Continuing the conflict would cost more resources than Corin was worth. But admitting defeat went against the swarm's nature. They had never retreated from an objective before. After 6 months of brutal warfare, both empires sent secret envoys to neutral territory. They wanted to negotiate. Not openly, not officially, but they wanted to find a way out of the conflict. The humans had proven they couldn't be bullied into submission. More importantly, the humans had made allies across the region. Continuing the war meant facing an ever-growing coalition. Admiral Sung met the envoys personally. She listened to their proposals, their attempts to find compromise that would let them save face. Then, she laid out humanity's terms. Complete recognition of Pilith sovereignty over Koran. Reparations for damages caused to Pilith settlements. Establishment of demilitarized zones along our borders. And formal treaties recognizing sapient species rights, even for species you consider primitive, the envoys protested. These terms were too harsh. The Vaxir and Thrennic had their own needs, their own security concerns. Sung listened patiently, then replied with words that would be quoted throughout the galaxy for generations. You made a mistake when you started this war. You thought we were fighting for territory or resources. We're not. We're fighting because watching the strong crush the weak makes us sick. And we'll keep fighting until you understand that size doesn't determine worth. Every species, no matter how small, deserves justice. The negotiations would take months more. But in that moment, sitting across from representatives of two ancient empires, Admiral Sung knew the war was effectively over. The Vaxir and Thrennic had learned their lesson. Humanity had paid for it in blood. But they had made their point. On Koran, Tilith stood in a rebuilt settlement, watching Pilith children play in gardens grown from crystal formations. Human engineers worked alongside Pilith craftsmen, building a future together. The war wasn't over yet, but hope had returned. Captain Hyun visited the settlement during a supply run. Tilith approached him with gratitude shining in those large eyes. You saved us. One cargo captain, who refused to look away. Hyun shook his head. I just got the ball rolling. Your people saved yourselves by having the courage to ask for help. And humanity? We just did what we always do when we see injustice. We couldn't live with ourselves if we did nothing. The war would end soon. But its echoes would shape the galaxy for centuries to come. 6 months after the Battle of Koran's Rings, representatives from a dozen species gathered at Viridian Gate Station. The same neutral space where Captain Hyun had first met Tilith would now witness the formal end of the three-system war. The corridors that had once seen simple trade now buzzed with diplomats, military officers, and journalists from across the galaxy. Hana led the human delegation. She had spent the past months negotiating every detail of what would become known as the Treaty of Viridian Gate. Dark circles under her eyes spoke to countless sleepless nights, but her posture was straight and her voice was strong. This treaty would define the future of the region. The main conference hall had been specially modified. At the center table sat representatives from all major parties. The Vaxir sent General Vex, a scarred veteran who had fought through the entire war. The Thrennic sent a speaker drone, connected to the hive mind but granted individual authority to negotiate. And representing the Pilith, wearing formal robes that glittered in the station's light, stood Tilith. It was significant that the Pilith stood at the same table as the empires that had tried to destroy them. No longer victims, they were recognized as equals. Hana began reading the treaty's key provisions. Article 1. Complete recognition of Pilith sovereignty over the planet Koran and its orbital space. Both the Vaxir Dominion and the Thrennic Swarm acknowledge that the Pilith people have exclusive authority over their homeworld. General Vex's claws scraped against the table, but he nodded agreement. The speaker drone's wings hummed in what might have been resignation. Both empires had learned that continuing the war was impossible. Article 2. Reparations. Both empires will provide resources and labor to rebuild damaged Pilith settlements. This will continue for a period of 10 standard years or until all damage is repaired, whichever comes first. This article had been the hardest to negotiate. The Vaxir saw it as shameful to pay reparations to species they considered inferior, but Hana had been firm. You broke it. You fix it. That's justice. Article 3. Demilitarized zones will be established along the borders between Vaxir, Threnic, and human space. No military vessels will enter these zones except for humanitarian missions, which must be announced in advance. The speaker drone spoke, its voice carrying the collective thoughts of the swarm. The demilitarized zones are acceptable. The swarm has calculated that peaceful coexistence is more efficient than continued conflict. Article 4. Technology sharing. The Pillith will share their Viridium-9 refining process with all signatories who maintain the peace. This includes new signatories who join the treaty framework. This was the sweetener that made the rest possible. The new refining technology was revolutionary. Several minor powers had already signed on just to gain access to it. The Vaxir and Threnic, despite their pride, couldn't afford to be left behind technologically. Article 5. Recognition of sapient species rights. All signatories acknowledge that sapient species, regardless of size or technological level, possess inherent rights including self-determination, protection from genocide, and representation in disputes affecting their worlds. This was the heart of the treaty, the principle that humans had fought for. General Vex looked like he wanted to protest, but he had his orders. The Vaxir government, fractured by internal disagreement and economic pressure, had decided that accepting these terms was better than continued isolation. The signing ceremony was brief. Each representative pressed their mark onto the digital treaty. When Tillith added the Pillith signature, his hand trembled slightly. It was done. His people were free, recognized, protected. After the ceremony, Admiral Sung held a press conference. Journalists from 100 worlds peppered her with questions. How many human casualties? Would this lead to more conflicts? What was humanity's next move? Sung answered carefully, but her core message was clear. We didn't fight this war for territory or profit. We fought because we believe in justice. The cost was high. We lost 4,000 brave men and women. Thousands more were injured. But look at what we achieved. An entire species was saved from extinction. 2 empires learned that might doesn't make right, and the galaxy saw that humanity will stand up for the weak. One journalist asked the question everyone was thinking. Admiral, was it worth it? 4,000 lives for a species most people had never heard of? Sung's eyes flashed. Every single one of those 4,000 would tell you yes. They knew what they were fighting for. They knew that if we let the Pillith be destroyed without acting, we'd be saying that some species matter and some don't. That's not a galaxy any of us want to live in. The costs of the war extended beyond human casualties. Parts of 3 star systems had been devastated. The Vaxir Dominion was fragmenting, with several colonies declaring independence and seeking human alliance. The Threnic swarm had undergone what they called a perspective integration, incorporating new concepts about individual rights into their collective consciousness. The galaxy's political landscape had been permanently altered, but there were positive changes too. On Corran, reconstruction was proceeding rapidly. Human engineers and Pillith craftsmen worked together, blending technology with the natural crystal formations of the planet. New settlements rose that were more beautiful than what had been destroyed. The Pillith population, which had dropped by half during the crisis, was recovering. Tillith had become his people's ambassador to Earth. He traveled to the human homeworld and was amazed by what he found. Humans came in all sizes, all colors, all backgrounds. They argued constantly about everything. But when they agreed on something, when they committed to a cause, they were unstoppable. He gave a speech at the UN Assembly that was broadcast across human space. My people were dying, and the galaxy looked away. One cargo captain refused to ignore us. That captain brought us to your people, and you fought for us. Not because we could pay you, not because we had something you wanted. You fought because it was right. The Pillith will never forget this. Captain Hyun attended that speech. He sat in the audience, uncomfortable with all the attention he'd received. To him, he'd just done what anyone should do. But humans kept calling him a hero, kept asking him to tell his story. He'd refused most interviews, but he'd agreed to speak at military academies. His message was always the same. I'm not special. I'm just a cargo hauler who couldn't walk away from people in trouble. But that's the point, isn't it? Any one of us can make a difference. You don't need to be an admiral or a general. You just need to care, and you need to act. After his speech at the UN, Hyun returned to his ship. The Times Wandering Star Times had been repaired and upgraded as thanks for his service. He could have accepted a position in the Navy, could have become rich and famous. Instead, he went back to hauling cargo. But now his crew included several pilots who had joined as partners in his small trading company. Captain Yule faced a different choice. After the war, he was offered promotion to admiral. He declined. The war had changed him. He'd seen too much death, given too many orders that sent people to die. He chose to retire from active service, taking a position as a teacher at the Naval Academy. His students hung on his every word. He taught them tactics and strategy, but more importantly, he taught them why they served. You'll face situations where the right choice isn't the easy one, he told them. Where doing what's just might cost you everything. In those moments, remember the Pilith. Remember that we fight for those who can't fight for themselves. Engineer Kwan stayed on Koran, working with Pilith scientists to further develop their technology. The partnership produced remarkable innovations. Within a year, they developed FTL drives that were twice as efficient as anything currently available. The technology was shared freely with treaty signatories, further cementing the peace. Commander Day received his promotion to admiral and took command of the new Protectorate Defense Network. Multiple species that had seen what happened with the Pilith had requested human protection. The Defense Network's mission was to prevent future genocides, to stand guard over those who couldn't defend themselves. It wasn't an easy job. The galaxy was full of bullies and predators. But now, they knew that humanity was watching, and humanity had proven they would act. The mere presence of human ships in a system was often enough to prevent conflict. 1 year after the Treaty of Viridian Gate, Hyun returned to Koran with a cargo of construction materials. He landed near a settlement that had been completely destroyed during the war. Now, it was rebuilt. Better than before. Children played in gardens where mining equipment had once crushed everything in its path. Tilith met him at the landing pad. The small Pilith diplomat had grown in confidence over the past year. His people had survived, and they were thriving. Captain Hyun, welcome back. Come. There's something I want to show you. They walked to the center of the settlement, where a monument had been erected. It was made of crystal and metal. Human technology and Pilith artistry combined. The sculpture showed a human hand, palm up, holding a Pilith figure gently. Around the base, an inscription was carved in multiple languages. No species too small, no justice too costly. Hyun stared at the monument for a long moment. He thought about all the people who had died, the sacrifices made. He thought about the 4,000 human lives lost, the Pilith who had been killed before help arrived, the Vaxir and Thrennic who had died in battle. Do you ever regret it? Tilith asked quietly. What you started? All the death that followed? Hyun looked down at his small friend. He looked at the children playing, at the rebuilt city, at the future that had been saved. Every war is a tragedy, he said slowly. Every life lost is a sorrow we carry. But Tilith, if I had walked past you in that market, if I'd done nothing, I couldn't have lived with myself. Some things are worth fighting for. Tilith's wings shimmered with emotion. The galaxy is learning that lesson. Because of you. Because of your people. Because we refuse to let size determine worth, Hyun corrected. That's all. We just treated you like you mattered. Because you do. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over Koran. The planet's crystal formations caught the light, creating rainbows that danced across the settlement. Human and Pillith engineers walked together, planning tomorrow's projects. Children of both species played together, learning each other's languages. This was the future they had fought for. Not conquest, not profit, not territory. Just the simple recognition that every sapient being deserved dignity, safety, and hope. The three-system war had ended, but its lessons would echo across the galaxy for generations. Humanity had established itself as a power not through conquest, but through principle. They had shown that they would fight for justice, regardless of cost. And most importantly, they had proven that, in a galaxy full of empires that measured worth by size and strength, there was at least one species that measured it differently. The small species had asked for aid, the human had agreed, and the galaxy would never be the same. Years later, historians would point to the Treaty of Viridian Gate as the moment that changed galactic politics. The phrase that became common wisdom in countless languages was simple: don't make humans choose between peace and justice. They'll choose justice every time. And in classrooms across human space, children learned about Captain Hyun and the Pillith. They learned that one person's choice to do the right thing could change everything. They learned that their species had fought a war not for gain but for principle. They learned to be proud of what humanity stood for. The monument on Koran became a place of pilgrimage. Beings from hundreds of worlds came to see it, to remember what had happened there. The inscription was simple, but its meaning was profound. No species was too small to matter. No justice was too costly to pursue. That was humanity's gift to the galaxy. And it was a gift that would keep on giving. Long after the last veteran of the three-system war had passed into history.